Imagine walking home on a 110-degree day where the pavement is literally melting. Your neighborhood is under a stage 3 power grid alert, but your home is a cool 75 degrees without any air conditioning. Instead, you have a beautiful $50 wall made of clay pots and water. This 4,000-year-old desert technology outperforms the billion-dollar HVAC industry. The Beehive Wall drops your temperature by 25 degrees without chemicals or electricity. Discover the ancient Persian secrets and why they've been kept from you. Subscribe to reclaim your independence and learn how it works. The average American family is trapped in a cooling paradox. As our summers get hotter and heat waves become more frequent, we turn our air conditioners up higher. This sounds like a logical solution, but it actually creates a vicious cycle. Standard air conditioning units are essentially heat movers. They pull heat from inside your house and dump it directly onto the street. This creates heat islands in our cities, making the outside air even hotter, which then requires your AC to work even harder. According to the latest data from early 2026, the national average residential electricity rate has climbed to over 17 cents per kilowatt hour, a nearly 10% jump from just a year ago. In states like California or Massachusetts, that number is closer to 30 cents. If you live in a 3,000 square foot home, you could easily be looking at a $500 monthly bill just to stay alive in the summer. And that doesn't even include the cost of the machine itself. A new HVAC system in 2025 and 2026 is costing homeowners between $10,000 and $20,000. We are spending a fortune on plastic boxes filled with toxic chemicals that are designed to break down every 10 to 15 years. But what if the answer wasn't a more complex machine, but a simpler material? The secret to this $50 cooling wall starts with the ancient Persians and Egyptians. Thousands of years ago, they didn't have the luxury of an electrical grid or chemical refrigerants. They had to rely on a deep understanding of physics and the earth beneath their feet. They noticed that when they put water into unglazed clay jars and placed them in a breeze, the air around the jars became noticeably colder. They scaled this up into massive structures called yakhchals, huge mud brick domes that could actually manufacture and store ice in the middle of a desert summer. They used wind catchers to pull hot air down through subterranean tunnels and over water-soaked clay. By the time the air reached the living quarters, it had been stripped of its heat and replaced with a chilled, earthy breeze. This wasn't magic, it was the power of evaporative cooling, and it is the same principle that makes your body sweat to stay cool. To understand why the Beehive Wall is so effective today, we have to look at the work of Manish Siripurapu and his team at Ant Studio in India. A few years ago, they were hired by an electronics factory that was facing a massive heat problem. The exhaust from their huge generators was creating a localized heat zone of 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Traditional air conditioning units were failing because the space was too open and the heat was too intense. Instead of installing more expensive machines, Manish designed a beehive structure using hundreds of unglazed terracotta tubes. By stacking these tubes in a honeycomb pattern and allowing a small amount of recycled water to trickle over them, they achieved something incredible. The hot air entered the wall at 122 degrees, but it came out the other side at just 97 degrees. That is a 25-degree drop achieved with zero chemicals and a tiny fraction of the energy. The physics behind this beehive is actually quite simple. Terracotta is naturally porous, meaning it is filled with millions of tiny microscopic holes. When the clay gets wet, it uses something called capillary action to pull that water through the entire body of the pot. This creates a massive surface area of wet clay. When hot air hits that wet surface, the water molecules steal the heat from the air to turn themselves into vapor. This transition from liquid to gas requires energy, and that energy comes directly from the air's temperature. But the beehive shape adds a second layer of efficiency called the Venturi effect. Because the air is forced through the narrow openings of the stacked tubes, it has to speed up. This faster moving air causes the water to evaporate much more quickly, which in turn drops the temperature even further. It is a high-performance cooling engine made entirely out of dirt. If you look at the data, the energy savings are almost unbelievable. In the factory test, the Beehive system performed the same cooling task as a massive mechanical unit, but used 80% less energy. The entire setup ran on less than 0.63 units of energy per hour. To put that in perspective, you could cool a massive industrial space for less than the cost of running a few old-fashioned light bulbs. For a homeowner in the US Sunbelt, places like Arizona, Texas, or Florida, this could mean the difference between a $400 monthly bill and a $40 bill. Plus, because the system is so low power, it can be run entirely off a single 20-watt solar panel. That means even if the grid fails during a record heat wave, your home stays cool. So, if this technology is so cheap, so effective, and so durable, why aren't we seeing it at our local Home Depot? Why aren't developers building every new home in Texas with a terracotta cooling facade? The answer isn't about physics, it is about profit and policy. The global HVAC industry is a $100 billion business built on a model of planned obsolescence. They want you to buy a complex machine that requires annual service calls and a full replacement every decade. There is simply no recurring profit in a stack of clay pots that can last for 50 years. You can't sell a subscription to a wall of dirt. Because of this, the industry has zero incentive to promote or even research these passive cooling solutions. There is also the hurdle of our rigid building codes. In the United States, we have spent the last 50 years obsessed with the sealed envelope model. We wrap our houses in plastic and make them as airtight as possible to maximize the efficiency of our mechanical heating and cooling. This works well for a standard AC unit, but it is the exact opposite of how a beehive wall works. A terracotta cooler is a breathing system. It requires a constant exchange of air with the outside to function properly. Because it doesn't fit into the standardized SEER ratings that building inspectors use, it is often legally excluded from being the primary cooling source for a new home. We are literally legislating our way into higher energy bills and less resilient homes because our rules were written by and for the industries that sell us mechanical equipment. But there is a way for you to reclaim this technology right now. You don't have to wait for a major corporation to sell you a smart version of this. The physics of the Beehive cooler are open source, and you can build a functional version for your patio or a specific room this weekend for about $50. The key is to source unglazed terracotta. This is very important, because if the clay has a shiny glaze or a decorative sheen, those microscopic pores are sealed and the water can't move to the surface. You can use standard flower pots or, for a more professional look, terracotta drainage pipes. Reclaim your home's resilience. To build your own, you simply arrange these pots in a honeycomb pattern inside a sturdy frame. You want to make sure the open ends of the pots are facing the direction of the breeze or toward the room you want to cool. At the base, you place a small reservoir of water with a cheap 12-volt fountain pump. You run a thin plastic tube to the top of the stack and let the water slowly drip over the clay. By connecting that pump to a small solar panel, you create a self-regulating system. When the sun is at its hottest, the solar panel provides the most power to the pump, which wets the clay more frequently, providing maximum cooling exactly when you need it most. When you use this system, you'll also notice something that no air conditioner can provide. Instead of the dry, recycled air that comes out of a standard vent, the Beehive cooler creates a gentle, natural humidity. It also releases a distinct earthy scent known as petrichor, the smell of rain hitting dry soil. Studies have shown that this scent actually has a psychological impact on the human brain, making us perceive the air as even cooler than it actually is. It provides a sense of relief and comfort that a plastic unit simply cannot replicate. In a world where energy prices are rising and our infrastructure is becoming more fragile, the Beehive wall represents a different path forward. It is a reminder that the most advanced solution isn't always the most complicated one. Sometimes the best way to move forward is to look 4,000 years into the past. We can have modern comfort without being tied to a massive monthly bill or a toxic chemical system. We just have to be willing to look past the plastic boxes we've been sold and embrace the simple, resilient power of earth, water, and wind. Reclaim your power, master the past. Hit that subscribe button right now to see every forgotten technique we reveal. The truth always comes back.